you believe the 2024 is upon us? But you know what? Even though I'm turning a year older, I'm still glad that there's going to be a lot of good new releases that are coming out in 2024. And today, we are talking about the highly anticipated fantasy and fantasy romance reads that are going to be releasing in 2024. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to start with January, and then we're going to go all the way toward to the end of the year. And fantasy romance are going to be intertwined, but I will tell you which ones are fantasy and which ones are fantasy romance. Plus, based off of the synopsis that I'm going to give you, you're pretty much going to guess which one falls into which category. Starting with January 1st, we have a expected release date on January 1st for this book that I am so excited for, okay? It is called Temptress of Fire and Fury by Scarlett St. Clair. If you guys are familiar with Scarlett St. Clair, she wrote the Touch of Darkness series, which follows the Greek mythology retelling of Persephone and Hades. And in this one, we are actually following Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, as she is then being forced to marry Hephaestus, who is technically the blacksmith god, but in this one he's like the fire god. And we see her as she's forced into this marriage, and Hephaestus is like, all right, now that we're married, you're not forced to do any marriage duties with me. Like, he wants nothing to do with Aphrodite. And Aphrodite, being obviously irresistible, I mean, she's the goddess of beauty, she's like, wait, what? And she's not taking no for an answer. And I'm just excited for this. I'm really interested in this whole new take on Hephaestus, because Hephaestus in Greek mythology, he is said to be like a really hideous dude. And in fact, Aphrodite was in love with Ares, and they had a whole thing going on, and then Zeus was like, no, you're marrying Hephaestus. So to see that Hephaestus is like a hot guy, I'm assuming, and that Aphrodite actually does want to be with him, I think that's a really interesting take on this tale, and I'm all for it. Coming out on January 16th is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which is a fantasy romance. It's a cozy fantasy, okay? And I don't want to go into detail about what this one's about, because this is actually book 2 of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies series. But in that book, we basically follow a woman named Emily Wilde, and she is a scholar who studies fairies, and in this world where fairies are real. And she's like this curmudgeon character, and we follow her on her journey, and these fairies are very interesting creatures. They're very different from the fairies that we see nowadays in a lot of fantasy romances, where they really want these like intense relationships with humans and fall in love with them, because in this series that's not really what fairies are like. They want nothing to do with humans for the most part. So I really liked that book, and I'm super excited to read the second one, and I'm going to get my hands on it as soon as it comes out, because I literally just read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, so while that's still fresh on my mind, I'm ready to read this one. On January 18th, we have a brand new series called Faybound by Sarah L. Arafi, and if I'm saying her name wrong, I'm so sorry. But in this story, we are following this world, this fae world, and we're following 2 sisters within this world. Now, one sister is a part of the elven army, and all she's known is like how to fight in battles. And her sister wants to be a diviner. She basically wants to be able to tell prophecies and all these things. But when the main character, the older sister, the one that was raised as a warrior, makes a mistake, she and her sister end up being exiled from their land, and they are forced to like live in the wilderness where the fae are. And apparently the fae haven't been seen in like hundreds and hundreds of years, until they meet this warrior and they see her, and they're just thrown into this fae world that's full of all these seductive secrets and mysteries, and it might just tear these two sisters apart. So this book looks really good. The cover itself is gorgeous. This is a fantasy series. It is first and foremost a fantasy series. I see here that it has some LGBTQ plus themes as well, so that's super awesome, and I think I'm gonna pick this up. So next on February 6th, we have a brand new book by Ali Hazelwood called Bride, and I'm super excited for it. Ali Hazelwood is known for all her like STEM novellas and novels, and I'm so excited to see this whole brand new take. This is a fantasy romance slash paranormal romance about this woman named Misery, and Misery is basically the daughter of the vampire councilman, and she has been exiled and outcasted again, and she is basically sent to sort of merge the tribes of the vampires and the werewolves together so they can kind of live in peace and harmony. And I'm assuming she becomes the werewolf leader, the pack leader's bride, and he knows that he can't trust her. And he's right, because our main character, Misery, is going to do just about anything to make sure that her vampire council and her vampire and her people are safe. Next on February 6th, we have The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. And this is a interesting sort of genre. It is a fantasy, but it's like a mystery fantasy. And in this story, we basically follow this like made up like world and empire, and we follow a detective among this empire named Anna. And Anna is like the greatest detective, and she's following this case where this man dies out of nowhere and a tree just sort of pops up from him. Okay, like that's how he dies. He becomes a tree, and nobody can explain what in the heck is going on. So they send Anna, who is like the world's greatest detective, to investigate, and she has this sidekick named Din, and Din is like this, he's like altered to have like excellent memory and like all these things, and he really gets infatuated, not like infatuated like as in love, but like really genuinely interested and intrigued by Anna, because he can't deny that she's like the world's greatest detective. And it seems like a really interesting story. The characters are supposed to be quite quirky. They're supposed to have that like Sherlock Holmes slash Watson sidekick style. So they're supposed to have that mystery element while containing fantasy elements, obviously with like a tree erupting from somebody's body that obviously is going to contain some sort of fantasy element to it. And it's interesting, okay? I think it's an interesting concept. I've never read like a fantasy with a mystery element to it, so I am a little intrigued. And again, the cover, gorgeous, gorgeous. But let me know what you guys think about this one. This next book comes out on February 13th, and it is called Projections by S.E. Porter, and this is a gothic historical fantasy novel. And in this novel, we follow this sorcerer and this woman who was murdered by the sorcerer. Now, the sorcerer ends up killing the woman because he was like super in love with her and she didn't reciprocate those same feelings, so he murders her, and in return, he starts creating all these projections of himself to other women in order to get the love that he didn't receive from this woman that was murdered. And so you see all these projections of him, and if the women that he projects upon or whatever don't love him back, they suffer dire consequences as well. So we're following all of these long lists of characters, all these women that are dealing with this sorcerer, and we're following the woman that was murdered from, I'm assuming the other side of life, death. This on that side. On February 27th, there is a new series coming out called Fate, Ink, and Blood by Daniel L. Jennison, and I'm really excited for this one. Daniel L. Jennison is the author to a very well-known series now. It was like hyped up on Booktok called The Bridge Kingdom. And this one I'm super excited for because we're actually following the tale of a Norse goddess named Freya. and her origin story, basically. So Freya is a wife, and she has always longed to be sort of like a badass warrior, and she has never gotten the chance. That is until her husband ends up making her fight his son. So not her son, like he has no blood relation to her, but his son to the death, and his son's name is Bjorn. I hope I'm saying his name right. And so after this, Freya ends up being this like a badass warrior, and we find out that she has this drop of a goddess's blood that creates this like shield for her, and basically she's able to repel attacks. And once we find this out, I guess it was like fated that somebody with a drop of the goddess's blood was going to like bring and unite their kingdoms. So the man that wants to be king ends up sending Bjorn to protect Freya, and we see Freya as she goes onto this journey while slowly falling in love with Bjorn, even though she knows that she shouldn't fall in love with him. And I'm super excited for this one. Next, on February 29th, we have book 2 in the Empire of the Vampire series, which is Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff. I don't want to read what this one is about because I have not read the first one, but I want to because I have heard nothing but tremendous, amazing things about this. And the first one, I believe, follows the story of this empire that was once ruled by humans, and the humans sent these warriors to fight against the vampires, and as time goes on, they start killing off all the human warriors until there's only one human warrior left, and the vampires have pretty much taken over the empire, and we see him as he's about to be killed, and we follow his life journey till he got to that point. And it's a huge, hefty book. That's why I have not read it yet, but I'm super excited for it. Since it's coming out towards the end of February, I'm probably going to read Empire of the Vampire in February. I have a lot of huge books in my 2024 TBR. And I just realized that it says February 29th, which means 2024 is a leap year. I didn't even make that connection until like now. I'm like, wait. It's leap year, you guys. Now we are moving on to March. So coming in at the beginning of March, on March 5th, we have Bloodguard by C.C. Robson. And in this story, we basically follow our main character. His name is Leith, L-E-I-T-H, Leith. I'm gonna call him Leith. That's probably wrong. We're gonna call him Leith. So Leith is basically trained, and he's entered in this tournament where he's basically a gladiator, okay? And he's fighting to the death day after day after day. But the reason why he's doing it, and the reason why he entered this whole gladiator tournament in the first place, is because if you manage to win and fight everyone off and kill everyone off, you are granted enough gold to be like rich beyond your wildest dreams. And the reason why he's doing this is to save his younger dying sister, and the only way that he's able to do that is to have enough gold to pay these doctors to actually help her live. And this tournament literally takes everything from him. It takes his body because he ends up getting obviously a lot of scars. And not just scars on the body, but on the soul too, because it ends up taking his humanity, like killing people day after day and fighting all these people off day after day. It's gonna eat at your soul. And eventually he meets Maeve, this princess that he knows that he shouldn't trust her, and he knows that he shouldn't like her, but he can't help but be attracted to her, especially when she offers him the title of Bloodguard, which is, you know, what the winners get, and the gold that he really wants to save his sister. But he's really hesitant because he knows that this kingdom is built on secrets and lies, and he has revenge planned. This book looks really good. It's already on my Amazon wish list. I don't think I pre-ordered it yet, but I probably am, okay? Because the Amazon wish list, it's also for me to like go back and be like, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart. And I think I'm going to be adding that because it has sprayed edges. If you pre-order it, you get sprayed edges. Now we are going into April. So on April 2nd, we have a brand new series called Dragon Rider by Taran Batharu, and this is a adult high fantasy series. Amidst the dragon love that we're getting right now, all the dragon hype and all the Dragon Rider hype, this series looks really good, and I feel like if you're a fan of Fourth Wing, this might be something that intrigues you, because we are following dragon riders. We are following this kingdom that has dragon riders, and we are following our main character Jai, who is basically imprisoned by this kingdom that has the dragon riders because his father led a rebellion, much like a dragon rider that we love very much, Zayden. And now he's imprisoned by these people. And I guess this kingdom, the leader ends up being engaged to this princess from another kingdom that brings with her dragons, and there's this chaos that ensues in which the main character Jai is able to escape, and he escapes with a handmaiden named Frida and a snatched up stolen dragon egg with them. And it just looks so good, okay? I am in my like romantasy and high fantasy era, and I need this book. On April 9th, we have a brand new book by Leah Bardugo called The Familiar, and this is a historical fantasy that takes place in Madrid, and we follow our main character, Lucia. Lucia is basically a servant that has magical powers, and she's able to like grab scraps of magic, and that's basically how she gets by like her hard days working as a servant. And pretty soon the mistress, the owner of the house, is like, oh my gosh, she realizes what she can do, and she's like, you're not gonna do that for no reason. Like, you're gonna start to do that for us and make us a fortune. And Lucia, little by little, starts to gain fame by like all these nobles, and eventually she captures the attention of this disgraced secretary of the king who really wants Lucia on his side, and so he has her start performing all these like magic tricks to basically get into the king's favor. And because of all this, Lucia is hiding another very dark secret. The fact that she's Jewish amongst the whole Inquisition is very, very dangerous. So she seeks the help of an immortal familiar to help her make sure that she's not discovered. And it looks good. I am not a historical fiction girly, but since it has these elements of fantasy woven into it, this might just be my cup of tea. Leah Bardugo, I have never read anything by her, honestly, but I do have The Ninth House and Hellbent, which won countless of awards on my TBR for 2024. So I'm probably going to read that first and then get into this one once it comes out. Now we're jumping straight into June. On June 12th, we have a new book that is coming out. It seems very much like cozy fantasy. It's a romantasy, and it is called A Rivalry of Hearts by Tassanja Odette. And this, nobody's talking about this book, and I don't know why, because the concept seems amazing, okay? If you like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, I feel like this might be right up your alley because it reminds me of that book, and if you read it, you'll probably know why. But in this story, we basically follow a woman named Edwina, and Edwina, one night, she ends up doing things that she shouldn't be doing. For example, they are told to never mingle with the Fae. They are told to never drink wine from the Fae, and they are told to never ever get into a contract with a Fae. Unfortunately, that is exactly what Edwina does when she drinks a little bit too much Fae wine, and she decides to get into this contract with this Fae man. And the contract basically is whoever gets the most people to their bed wins. What do they win? I don't know. But it just seems so good, okay? It just reminds me so much of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and the artwork it seems so like classical and beautiful to me. I just think this is going to be right up my alley, and I don't know why nobody's talking about this book. It just looks good and cute and cozy, and if you're a cozy fantasy lover, look no further because this looks so good. Now on July 23rd, we have a new adult fantasy called The Last One by Rachel Housel Hall, and it looks like this is going to be a standalone book, a standalone fantasy book, which we don't really see too much anymore. And again, this is another one where if you pre-order on Amazon, it does look like you get some sort of sprayed edges. This is being like told as in like The Witcher meets N.K. Jemisin's tales, and we follow this woman who basically forgets her past and she forgot her life, but she knows that she is powerful, she knows that she has powers, and she wakes up naked and she notices that all these creatures and beasts are hunting for her, and every single time that she fights, she unlocks a brand new power that she didn't have before. But here's the catch: every time she fights and every time she uses her powers, a piece of her slowly dies, and then somebody from her past just pops in to tell her that they're there to stop her because she's powerful and she needs to be stopped until she is a danger to everyone. And this book looks really good. It's a standalone, and the premise isn't giving me hope that it's going to end beautifully or happily, but it does look very interesting and like a very unique concept. Now on August 13th, we have Lady Macbeth by Ava Reed coming out, and all I know is that this is going to be Macbeth's own story, and it's gonna tie in some sort of fantasy elements to it because it is being genred here as fantasy, adult fantasy, and it's supposed to be for fans of Cersei. So it might have some like feminist elements to it or a new take on Lady Macbeth. And I'm intrigued. That's all we know so far. There's like no synopsis that's attached to it on Goodreads, so that's all I know. Now on August 20th, we have a new fantasy series by T. Kingfisher called A Sorceress Comes to Call. And this is basically a retelling of the Brothers Grimm story Goose Girl. And in this story, we follow our main character Cordelia as she realizes that she's very different and her mother is very different from everybody else. One, her house has no doors inside the house because there are no secrets. According to her mother, Cordelia is also not allowed to have friends other than her mother's horse. And of course that her mother is a sorceress. Cordelia knows this. Now, one day this man just ends up being dead, like he was killed. And in the middle of the night, Cordelia's mother decides to just pack everything up. She's like, hey, we're leaving. And they go to this other town where there's this like wealthy rich man, a squire, and his sister Hester. And the mother wants to like bewitch this man into like marrying her, and Hester, the sister, sees it, and she sees how Cordelia reacts to her mother, so she knows that there's something very fishy about her mother, and she wants to save Cordelia from her mom, and she wants to save her brother from this bewitchment and this witch. So she's gonna have to fight off a wicked witch of the worst kind, and it just seems really intriguing. This is also another standalone fantasy, so I feel like there's quite a good amount of standalone fantasies on this list. It looks interesting. It's T. Kingfisher, who writes a lot of horror, and this is like a fantasy horror-ish sort of vibe it's being described as. So I'm very interested in this one. Anyways, you guys, that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys made it all the way to the end, drop a twinkling star emoji letting me know that you reached the very end. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button to be notified when I post. I post twice a week. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!